Hello and welcome today to another session or episode of the Society of Breast Imaging summer chat. So it's our SBI summer chat where we talk about various topics directed towards patients as well as our profession of breast imaging. So today, the topic we're going to discuss is particularly focused on fellows, breast imaging fellows transitioning to practice. And we have an illustrious group of panelists that have volunteered their time today. So first we're going to go over introductions, and everyone's going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to just hop in and start the questions. So, Ren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for logging in tonight to listen to our discussion. I'm Brenda Alcali. I'm a breast imaging radiologist at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. I'm also the co-chair of the resident and fellow section at the SBI. I did my breast imaging training at Columbia Presbyterian and finished in 2015. And I transitioned into a very busy private practice, and I stayed there for 2 years until I transitioned again into a purely academic job at Georgetown. So I've been there for 3 years. I'd be happy to share what I learned, kind of with the 2 transitions that I had.
Great. Welcome. Matt?
Oh, I think ladies before gentlemen, right? I'll go last. Everyone, I've been on here too much. Everyone else introduce themselves.
Everyone knows who you are.
That's true. All right. How about Margaret?
Hi, I'm Margaret, and I'm at Wake Forest now. I'm a breast imager. And here is also where I did my fellowship. And right after I finished my fellowship, I went into a busy private practice and then realized it really wasn't for me and I wanted to go back into academics. So here I am back again. And right now I'm the fellowship director here at Wake Forest for breast imaging.
Wonderful. Tiff?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiff Chan. I'm currently UCLA faculty in breast imaging. I did my fellowship just about 2 years ago, so I finished 1 year of being an attending. I actually served on the fellowship selection committee this past year, so it's been very interesting seeing the other side of things. I did do my training on the East Coast, so I am bi-coastal, and I'm very excited to kind of share with you what I've learned throughout this very interesting process.
Great. Now, Matt?
Hey, everyone. It's me again, Matt Miller. I am a breast imaging radiologist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Allegheny Health Network. I am currently the associate program director of the residency program, and I'm involved with the fellowship selection as well. I finished my fellowship a little over a year ago at West Virginia University. I'm down in Morgantown, where I did all my training, med school, residency, fellowship, and now I'm up in Pittsburgh. So excited to get the perspective on different from different people today. Sounds like we got some good backgrounds here.
Yeah. And my name's Amy Patel. I'm a breast imager who actually did her breast imaging fellowship at Washington University in St. Louis at Mallinckrodt Institute of Radiology. And I actually started in pure academia at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. I was also involved with fellowship interviewing in that committee. And then I actually ended up now 2 years returning to the area in which I was raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm now in private practice, but I now have an academic appointment with University of Missouri, Kansas City. So I'm sort of in a hybrid model. So there's so many models, and we'll discuss all of that today. So, well, let's just jump into the first question. Ren, do you want to take it away?
Sure, yeah. So we had a compiled a list of questions, but we're going to start with the current fellows who are doing their fellowship this year. What do you think, if there are any skills that they can focus on during fellowship to kind of help ease the transition into real world practice? So, I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of things. I mean, probably besides towards the end of fellowship, besides getting the licenses, that they're working in more than one state, getting the privileges taken care of. But probably for me, I mean, if you want me to start, to me, I felt like kind of honing the ultrasound skills was very important, because you can't guarantee that you're going to be in a practice that they have a sonotechnologist. It's really important to learn it and kind of be good at it. Even if you had a superstellar ultrasound tech in fellowship, it's important to back scan and make sure that the palpable lump was really a cyst and not a cancer that's sitting right next to it. And also, to me, also, I felt that if the person knows, that they're going into a fellowship, that they offer an elective month or two, it's nice to have that elective month towards the end of fellowship, because by that time they'll have the job ready. If they sign the contract, they know exactly what the job wants them to do. So if they want them to do an OB ultrasound, they can ask to be placed in, OB ultrasound rotation in that elective and something like that. So that was helpful for me.
I always tell trainees that are making that transition, just absorb as much as you can that fellowship year. Take as many cases as you can, be as hands-on as you can, because depending on what practice you go into, particularly, if you're going into private practice and it might be a remote area, you may end up being the expert, and you really need to be proficient at your skill set. So I tell, fellows to just jump in, do as much as you can, see as much as you can, because you may never get that opportunity again. Then I also tell them, if you've already signed with a practice, maybe touch base with them, see what you really need to hone on, what you're going to be thrown into doing in practice. Because I think a lot of times there's a misconception between what the fellow who becomes a new practicing radiologist, what they think they're going to do, but then what they actually end up doing. So really, knowing exactly what, and you're not going to always know exactly what you're getting yourself into when you begin practice, but if you can at least, have those lines of communication open, I think it will serve you well, especially in that first year of practice.
Definitely. I mean, I think one very good frame of mind to be in throughout all of fellowship is making decisions on your own in the beginning, in your head, for instance, when you first start. I think you should think of fellowship as being kind of like a mini attending sort of situation where, what would I do in this position if I was by myself? Like, start thinking that from the very beginning, come up with the next few steps. And then, obviously you have attending backup. It's like the best situation. But you don't want to wait for, your attending to make the decision for you, maybe in the beginning, but, start coming up with a plan on your own. And then the second thing I think that's important is getting comfortable with screeners. So I'm not sure how other fellowships do this, but I do feel like that was a really big part of becoming an attending, was being confident in my screening mammograms. And that was kind of tough during fellowship. You're learning like how to do procedures, how to work up diagnostics. And you kind of forget that, like, without screening mammograms, we wouldn't have like half the business, that's a really big part of it. And that's also a really good time to hone on these skills, because you can call back like a lot of things that you're not sure about. And there's not really a consequence, because your attending is going to, be a second reader. It's a perfect time to really find out the things that, are bothering you too much on mammogram, but actually aren't a big deal, or things that, on the other hand, that you really should be focusing on. Those are kind of two things I thought were really important.
Yeah, and I would echo that too. I think making sure that you're really trying to make those conclusions before you bring the case to an attending is important. Also, when you're reading those screener mammograms as a fellow, some fellowships have where you have some independent read time where you're actually signing it off, while other fellowships don't. And even if you can't get your statistics in a typical way because you're just kind of reading them, prelimming them first before going through with your attending, keep track of your callbacks. What percentage are you at? Is it going down throughout the year? And also create a folder. A lot of PAC systems have this where you can actually, create a folder of all your callbacks and see what happens with them. Same thing, path correlations, try to do as many of those as possible and start from the beginning. See, was it a callback? How did it look? How was it worked up? And how did it get to where it is? So I think those are a couple of really important things. Moonlighting, not everyone is going just into breast imaging. Some people are going to do other things. So if there's moonlighting available to keep up skills, more general skills during your fellowship, I think that's a really important thing to do as well.
I agree with what everyone says. I think the screener idea that you touched on that last week as well, Tiff. I think that's paramount. And then talking about the ultrasound, like you guys said, I mean, you are expected to be the expert. July 1 of your attending your graduation from fellowship and into being an attending, you're expected to be the breast imaging fellow or the breast imaging expert. And so not only do you need to be the expert at what you do as a radiologist, but you should have a pretty good feel. I mean, no one's going to be as good as, that tech that has been doing ultrasounds for 30 years, but at least being able to have your own technique at doing ultrasound, at doing procedures, that's fellowship's the time that you hone that. I mean, you can even start in residency. I recommend, if you're whatever specialty, if you decide early that you want to go into breast, or if you want to go into whatever, take special interest in that, in that specialty during residency even, and then, even parlay that into more success in fellowship. A couple of things that I don't think have been touched on yet, that I found really helpful when I was a fellow was learning how to break bad news. As a resident, you're kind of shielded from it. I mean, you can kind of, watch your attending talk to patients, say, this is suspicious. This is something that I'm concerned about. We really need to biopsy this. And then the patient goes, well, how concerned are you? And then, you can go into the statistics of things. Learning how to navigate those conversations is really, really, really beneficial during fellowship, so that when you're thrust into, you're the only person in the room talking to the patient and they're just looking for answers. Mm-hmm. Having experience in those conversations where you have a staff in the room with you during fellowship is very, very beneficial. And I learned from a couple of great staff down at WVU how to have those conversations, and not only the bad conversations, but also learn how to, I developed what I called my spiels about things. Learn how to talk about a BI-RADS 3 lesion, learn how to talk about a cyst. Well, a cyst in your breast is different from a cyst in your ovary, different from a cyst in your pancreas. Patient come in, oh, I got cysts all over my pancreas and what. Well, that's a little bit different than a cyst in your breast. And learn how to have those conversations, learn how to talk about, this is where I want to follow this because I'm fairly confident that this is benign. I would call this probably benign, but I don't want to throw it back in the screening pile. I think that we should just have heightened sense of awareness type of thing. Learn, have the consent down pat. That's often overlooked, and you think, oh, consent is easy or whatnot, but be able to rattle off, procedural outlines for patients and talk about all the ins and outs of it and answer, the questions that all the patients ask about it. Have those, what I call my spiels, have those down pat. Fellowship is a time to hone those. And so that's my advice.
Yeah, those are just great tips. Shall we move on to question 2? All right. So, we all had mentors that really helped us throughout our training years, residency, fellowship, So the question is, can we maintain those mentorship relationships even if you're not at those institutions anymore? And taking it a step further, are we able to garner both informal and formal mentors, regardless of practice type, regardless of what practice we are currently in?
So I think in academics, this is a little bit easier than being in private practice, because to me, I felt like we were always in a big reading room. I have my colleagues available. If I, had a question on a case, we always run cases by each other and we discuss them. We have our section chief that we run issues by if we have any concerns. And to me, I kind of assigned an informal mentor, and that is the vice chair of research. I asked her if it's okay, and I started checking in with her every 3 or 4 months, and just to kind of follow up and see how I'm doing. It's very informal. She really helps me kind of discuss what issues I have. She gives positive or negative feedback, talk about the research progress and what's happening in the, in my work. But when I was in private practice, it was kind of like an unusual, but I was lucky to have that, is that the practice really assigned every new hire, whether they were newly graduated fellows or any person who's coming from a different practice, they assigned them senior mentors. And to me, that was very helpful because my mentor was a breast imaging trained radiologist from Memorial Sloan Kettering. And she literally was available all the time. I used to call her if I had any questions. She would call me to talk about the speed, to talk about callback rate, to talk about all these tiny little issues. And she would also call me and say, well, hey, this is a great pickup, what a great job. So I feel like wherever you are, whether you're in private practice or academics, your practice wants you to succeed. So they will provide whatever you need to help you do that. And I don't think anybody is going to say, no, we don't want you to have that mentor. Everyone's going to be very welcoming to that. Also, I felt like it's very important to have an outsider, a mentor from a different institution, because to me, they would provide a very genuine and neutral advice, and I found that very helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think having different types of mentors in different kind of settings throughout your the scope of your practice, not just a breast imager. I mean, when I signed up here at Allegheny Health Network, I found mentors not only in my own section, but I'm now the associate program director, and I consider the current program director as one of my biggest mentors. And just by that, he's an MSK radiologist, and it's just but he's still a radiologist, and so we navigate kind of the academic world together, and I watch how he deals with residents and whatnot, and being able to have those mentors is paramount. And just because it sounds like everyone here, most people here, did some type of training elsewhere from where they're currently stationed at now. Just because you leave a place doesn't mean you lose those mentors. Mm-hmm. And so I still keep in contact with pretty much all the breast imagers down at WVU, and some of it's on a personal note, but a lot of it is still professional advice, and hey, do you guys do this down there? What do you guys think of this? This is what we're planning on doing, type of thing. Keeping those mentors, and being involved what we're doing right now, talking to each other. There's a certain degree of mentorship, and I consider Amy, Dr. Patel, I consider her a mentor. I don't even think we've ever met in person, Amy, but we've had a lot of dealings together just by being on these committees and interacting on social media together and whatnot. Mentors can take different forms and shapes. And I think if you're looking for a mentor in a specific category, you can find one.
Yeah, I always tell, trainees and mentoring that you really need a diverse cadre of mentors at every career level, different practice types, genders. I think it's so important. And honestly, I think a lot of the things that I've accomplished this far would not have occurred without having very, very strong mentors and sponsors. And, and a lot of them I never even encountered in training. I still, rely a lot on my former attendings and fellowship. That's where you really forge bonds. I feel like, it's a tough year, even though, people may say, oh, breast imaging fellowship's not, that difficult or whatever. I think any fellowship you do is difficult because you're learning at such a rapid pace, and the learning curve is so steep. And so very grateful to have those mentors. But I think that we now, and as you all who are on social media can attest, I think social media has opened another door for the possibility of mentorship and sponsorship, particularly those who might feel alone at their own institutions and practices. And I think a lot of us are willing to take others on and help guide and mentor them. So I think this is a great time to be a breast imager or to be a radiologist, because we do have such a great support network that we can all reach out to for support.
I mean, I think the mentorship, kind of experience is very, very important. Even when I was a first year radiology resident, there were some seniors, fourth years, that were going into breast imaging. And in my eyes, they were mentors to me because they kind of encompassed everything that I wanted to be. Sure, confident, just like any other fourth year is, but just like very balanced, happy, and just in general, a good people. And interesting because one of these seniors actually I've kept in touch with through Facebook. So Amy, what you were saying about social media is super important. And she was actually doing a multi-center sort of study more recently and was trying to get my input on it because I'm on the West Coast, and it was great to have like another academic institution. So it's kind of another way to really continue projects if you want to be very practical about it. In addition, I noticed that one of my mentors at my residency put out a great paper in JBI about breast pain. And this article actually was circulating in my section because our section chief was like, hey, this is a great article from JBI. And I was like, wait a minute, I recognize those names. And so it was a really great way to get in touch back with them as well, too, and kind of figure out what they've been doing. So, the whole experience does not have to end when you leave, because I'm obviously not, where I trained before. I'll tell you from my experience now as a junior faculty, we do get assigned, like senior mentors. And my current mentor is very research focused and went through my resume with me, went through my MQSA numbers, and was super awesome and telling me, hey, like, you have enough in this category. You could do more in like creative RVUs, that sort of thing. So mentors can really help pave your road to the next step. And, at a certain point, I'm kind of like a mentor to some residents, I would like to think, or med students, or even, younger residents. So we can really give back in a lot of ways. Even what we're doing right now is kind of like an informal mentorship. So that's pretty awesome,
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone said. Mentorship is so important. You can use it to kind of get research projects going, get on the lecture circuit if that's something you're interested in. You can share cases if you have a difficult case. I think it's really important. I think, academics, it's often more obvious how to go about getting a mentor. One is assigned, but I actually had the experience in private practice where I had a mentor assigned, and I had two other people who joined the practice at a fellowship, and they had mentors assigned as well. So I think it's something not to be, don't be bashful about asking for a mentor, even if you're in private practice, your section chief. I think it's something everyone really sees the value in.
For sure. All right, so maybe we can move on to question number 3. What tips do we have to offer transitioning fellows to kind of find the balance between clinical work, teaching, and research? And that question is more like for, an academic position, but it's always hard to balance between those three. What do you think is, most helpful for them to do in the first year and able to, in order to succeed?
Well, I think I'll start. I think everybody's different. I think everybody has different interests and different, you can put these three things, clinical work, teaching, and research, all on a sliding scale. And, when one goes up, maybe the other one might go down a little bit. And as far as, I like to play sports video games. And so, you create a player in NFL, Madden NFL, and, their speed might go up, but their strength might go down type of thing. You know what I mean? And so these are pretty much attributes of a breast imaging or of any, radiologist. Obviously, if you join private practice, there's still research to be done in private practice. I can't speak from experience, but I do know friends that are in private practice who still do research. But traditionally, you join academics, it's going to be more research heavy than it will be in private practice. My advice, I'm not as much, I'll do research here and there, but I'm not going to be a cutting edge researcher. I'm not going to be the person that's, gonna come up with the new version of tomosynthesis or whatnot via, in this brain of mine. But I'm creative in other ways, and so I like to teach. I like to talk to people. I hope you guys get that from me. But I reached out to the program director, said, hey, do you need any help with anything? And that parlayed into him saying, well, I think we get along pretty well. Would you like to be my APD? I need an APD. And, just reaching out to people with similar interests is very important. And that kind of harkens back to talking about mentorship. So, find a mentor, in these different avenues. Tiff talked about having the research heavy mentor. If you're into research, then find the person that's written all the stuff in your department and say, hey, can I get on some of that? Let me help. I can, have enthusiasm, and then by doing that, then hopefully you can come up with stuff of your own, and then you can bring other people along for the ride with you. And so, I mean, that's my advice on those topics.
I think the first 6 months that when you're transitioning from a fellow to practice, I think they are the toughest. You had a year of a steep learning curve, and now you've hit another steep learning curve. So, my advice would be, it is wonderful to do the research and to do all these other things, but those first 6 months are crucial because you're really learning the lay of the land. You're learning the players. You're learning the radiology section or hospital politics, and culture eats strategy for lunch. So I would advise to just sort of sit back, sort of observe, and really hone in clinically as well. And that goes for any practice type, whether you're academics, private practice, telerad, whatever you're doing. I mean, I really think that clinical focus should be there. Now, slowly, I feel like you really can, if you do have a lot of interest in research, you will identify those who can particularly help you. And I think that if someone knows that you do have an interest in research or education, I do think that there will be people in your practice or institution that will reach out to you. And just like Matt said, you alternatively need to be reaching out to them as well. But I think particularly, those first 6 months, the clinical component is just so crucial.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, because I feel like sometimes it's not even the first 6 months. It could go up to the first 12 months. To me, I feel like the fellow or the newly hired attending should focus on what they were hired to do, to succeed at what they were hired to do. Because we are physicians before we are researchers, before we are teachers. Of course, we want to succeed at everything. The balance will always be challenging. Add to that family commitments and kids commitment. But like Amy said, I feel like clinically we have to feel very comfortable. We want to make sure that we know exactly what the workflow is like. We want to have a goal of that. The referring providers, oncologists, surgeons, they trust our opinion. They look for us. They feel comfortable when we're the ones reading the study. To me, that I had to learn that. Nobody told me that. I mean, I wish someone had told me that. But I'm happy that I'm sharing that with everybody now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm at an academic, obviously. And I think that, your first few months really should be focused on just being a good physician. That being said, we do always have residents and sometimes med students on service with us. So we're always kind of inadvertently teaching anyways. Certainly, teaching procedures was what made me very nervous in the beginning. Probably the thing that made me the most nervous, actually. Because from one day I was basically a fellow who's fairly confident, but still had backup in the room. And then the next day I was supervising like a third year radiology resident who I couldn't remember, if they had been on service recently and they were trying to figure things out again. So, but in that way, it also kind of taught me different techniques on how I can show what I had learned as well too. And I learned so much more than I realized throughout my fellowship. And, if you want to be efficient, there are projects that involve teaching and resident curriculum, for instance. So when I first started off, I completely agree. It was very hard to balance learning things clinically, teaching, research, all these things. But I kind of rolled some things into one where I created resident-driven sort of projects. And a lot of it actually was related to, the curriculum that they currently have, their expectations or rotations. So I'm kind of doing both research and teaching at the same time. I think that now during my second year where I have things a little bit more under control, then maybe I can explore some things that are outside of the teaching realm. But, take it one step at a time. You don't need to do 4 things at once. And first and foremost, like everybody said, being a physician is the most important thing. And then, try to do 1 or 2 projects, quality over quantity, really. This is not like in high school where you try to get involved in a bunch of extracurriculars and nothing happens out of it. You want to have 1 or 2 things that.
And I was on the Key Club.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be able to keep it up. You want to have enough interest. And of course, you want to choose projects that, can be finished, that have an endpoint and have a meaningful goal. So those are things you can look for, and don't get overwhelmed. It happens.
Yeah, and I think, it's always a hard balance between clinical work and basically everything else, the teaching and the research in the first year, particularly if you're in a very busy private practice, gaining that speed on top of learning, all your colleagues and how your practice may vary from the practice of your fellowship. Well, it'll take a while. I think one of the things, you can't do everything all at once and really do a good job at it, is you have to figure out what your passion is. If your passion is education, go ahead and work more in education. And if that's really what your passion is, your research can be educational research. So I think you have to decide what your passion is and then really go for it. Contact, people who have similar passions to help you out. Again, going back to that mentorship idea. So I think that's what the advice that I would give. Also, if you're interested in research, it may be helpful to start off with an ongoing research project rather than deciding to start your own right away and be the PI. I think that can also be really helpful.
Okay, so should we move on to the next question? All right, so I want to get this right, so I'm looking at it. I have it written down here. So a frequent question that we get from former trainees is to how to manage disagreements, particularly with senior colleagues who are not necessarily breast imaging fellowship trained and then don't follow up-to-date guidelines. So any advice from the panelists on how to navigate that?
Yeah, I think, the thing that you have to keep in mind is you have to do what's best for the patient at all times. Otherwise, that's what we're here for. We're here to give the best patient care possible. That's what we've been training all this time for. So I think you have to do what you believe is right, but also more senior colleagues have experiences that I think are important to understand. Why are they doing this? Why are they wanting to stray from the guidelines? And I think it's important to get their perspective on things. And then, once you have that perspective, go research the topic, make sure that you are understanding it correctly, and then move forward that way. I think one of the things to keep in mind is to always try to maintain a respectful relationship with all of your colleagues. But you can disagree on things, but maintain that respectful relationship.
Definitely. I mean, it's all about your approach, right? If there's something that you're like, okay, I read about this before, let's say it's like a BI-RADS thing, and what we're doing for this patient is kind of different from what I read about. I mean, you can always show what you were looking at to that attending, just be like, hey, like, what am I missing here? Is there a special situation, for instance, that this book is not talking about? Or like, what experience do you have that makes you stray a little bit from this? Obviously, don't use the word like stray from BI-RADS, but you can present them with what you're confused about. And I think that if you present things as in like, hey, I'm learning, teach me, then nobody can be offended by anything. Now, if you come down hard and you're like, I don't think that's right, blah, 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 then that's obviously different. So you can still make this a learning experience, and maybe they will learn something too, who knows? But yeah, I think it's about the approach. Just like anything else in life, in radiology, I'm sure this is not something that's unique to us by any means.
Yeah, just to echo that, Tiff, I mean, just be nice, and peer review articles exist for a reason. And, standard of care is standard of care. And so, that's data isn't mean. Data doesn't have feelings. It's just, when you see someone who's doing something that is outdated or has been shown to not be as effective as the new standard of care, be nice about it, but say, hey, have you seen this thing here? I mean, this is what I'm thinking. Can you teach me about what you're doing? And, if you're nice, there shouldn't be a problem, non-threatening kindergarten stuff.
I agree with everyone, what everyone is saying. In my opinion, I feel like experience and knowledge, they complement each other. So when you finish fellowship and you did such a great job, maybe you passed the boards with very high scores in breast imaging, you know about every single article out there, but you still lack the experience. You just started. And in fact, you learn most of the skills of breast imaging in your very first year when you're flying on your own, you're making your own mistakes and learning from them. And the senior radiologists, like Margaret, you said, they have the experience. They've seen it a lot. And there's a reason why they're managing it in a certain way, not necessarily they follow up on up-to-date guidelines. So I felt like, well, this is very common in private practice, let's say. So to me, probably building that relationship with them, start calling them and running cases by them, not necessarily the same case, but maybe other things. Maybe you'll give the impression that you are someone they can, you are accountable, they can trust you. So you can bring them at some point, have you seen that article? Have you heard about those guidelines? I think you can definitely, manage it, because it's a kind of a tricky situation, and it's very common as well. But I feel like we should, kind of build that relationship to avoid any challenging situations.
Yes, and just to echo what you're saying, Rend, it's difficult. I mean, any way you skin it, because, I have, I'm the prime example. 2 years ago, I was recruited to take over a breast center, and I'm working with Alliance Radiology. I am significantly younger than everyone in my group, and I'm overseeing the breast now. And so, they are wonderful. They have over 100 years of experience combined. And so there's so much you can learn from your colleagues, but alternatively, there were also things that we needed to get up to snuff. Just like Matt said, standard of care. And, sitting down with them and going over particularly standard breast practices, things that I thought perhaps we could do collectively to improve the practice. I think, like Tip said, approach is everything. And at the end of the day, I do think that, we've taken that Hippocratic oath and we want to put our patients first and we want to do what's right. And so I'm fortunate that I am in a practice where everyone bought in. We put our patients first. And but I know that there are others in positions such as that I was thrown into that may not have as receptive of colleagues. And so I acknowledge that I probably got off easily there. But I think, the delivery, the approach, why we do this, why this is important. And at the end of the day, focusing on patient care, I think you will go a long way regardless of what practice type you enter that sort of situation in.
Absolutely. And I want to put a caveat or a little appendix on what I kind of talked about, standard of care and whatnot. There's standard of care, and then there's some of an art to what we do, right? And so not everyone practices the same. And, there is standard of care, and, a cancer looks like a cancer, but then case in point is BI-RADS 3, right? So, you'll have a vast, range of rates that different breast imagers give BI-RADS 3s for lesions. There are some people that, they either give it a 2 or a 4. And, for better or worse, BI-RADS 3 is there for a reason. And, coming into a new practice and you're taught to, give a complicated cyst a BI-RADS 3, and, this one person doesn't do that, just, calls them all benign or biopsies all of them, sticks in, one extreme or the other, expecting that person to change the way that they practice, even though that it's not wrong in any means. It's just different from what you do. That's where the kind of the art of what we do comes into play. That's kind of the caveat to, at the end of the day, doing something outdated or whatnot is one thing, and there's literature to support that. But when you're getting into kind of the finesse and the art of what we do, that's you don't want to try to change a person's approach from that standpoint, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think the next question, we tried to add a little bit fun to our discussion tonight. So we're going to do a quick round.
What are you talking about?
We're going to do a quick round of what to do and what not to do in our first year, like the do's and don'ts. If you, like, each one of us would just share something that was, you thought it was helpful in your first year.
Do show up on time. Early, actually.
Number one.
Early. Yeah, show up like 15 minutes early and, review some last minute cases, although you should be reviewing it the night before. But if you're like even 10, 15 early, that like shows that you're interested, even just physically being there. and you can get a head start on the things for the day. So I would do that.
Nice.
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. It's really important. Every practice, like Matt was saying, it's a bit of an art to it. And every practice is a little bit different. It's not wrong, but you want to try to understand it, especially early on. So don't be afraid to ask questions, get to know your breast surgeons, pathologists, go to tumor boards, that sort of thing.
I would say don't think you can come in thinking that you can change every problem overnight. I think that, looking back when I was in my first 6 months of practice, I had all these ideas and I had them written down and I'm like sharing them with my chair and it's like, whoa, slow down there, soldier. So I think that, that's why I was saying those first 6 months, things I wish I would have learned as a resident. Yeah. So, I think observing and really learning the lay of the land and the culture and the players, I think it's really important. So I do think, however, that you can invoke really meaningful change, but I think that there's a way to go about it and a time to do it. So I would just say that in the beginning, don't go into that mindset thinking I'm going to change everything like right now, because it's a work in progress. So
I would say, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I would say do establish relationships with everybody, from your colleagues on down to the receptionist at the front desk. You're not going to remember everyone's name the first day. You're not going to remember it the first week. Heck, I mean, I still blank on some names every once in a while. We go to 4 different centers, but having a meaningful relationship with everybody that you work with, it just makes the day go by better. And, when you have different things that you talk about, oh, well, there's, Peggy Sue, this is what we like to talk about. There's, Jimmy Ray, this is what we like to talk about, type of thing. Hey, how's your mother doing? How's, down to like, I knew that one of our techs husband works on cars, and I had him do some stuff on my car. Having those types of relationships, is meaningful just in life, but it also helps you develop a kind of a rapport with everybody, so that a tech knows that, okay, this is what Dr. Miller likes, and this is how Dr. Miller likes to do things. This is how the day is going to run, type of thing. And so it makes things run smoother. It makes your day be more fruitful in that you feel like you get more substance. You're not just there looking at mammograms and ultrasounds and MRs and doing procedures or whatnot. You're actually having meaningful relationships and conversations with the people that you work with. And that just goes a long way in making you enjoy your time more. It makes you more effective, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, and to me, I would say be flexible, because remember, the first 6 to 12 months, it is called the yes phase. So if you are called by your scheduler or the vice chair or anybody who makes the schedule and they ask for a switch, it's very good for you if you said yes. And if you get a question that someone wants a switch because they're going out of town, and most importantly, if this person is a senior person, be the first one to jump in. You don't have to get all of your weekends off. You don't have to go to everything you want to go to in the first 12 months, I would say. I just found that very helpful, because that really gives the impression that you're such a good team player. You care about the success of your practice, and you are very flexible. And whenever they need, you're the one who's there to do the work. That was very helpful. And I mean, obviously, you still have to be flexible even beyond the 12 months, but the very first 12 months are crucial to give that good impression about yourself. Do we do another round, Amy?
Yeah, we have one more question if we want to go to the final question.
Okay.
Okay. How do you build a mentor-mentee relationship in the time of a pandemic? As you know, a lot of times in the last few months, we can't meet residents in person, no in-person grand rounds, one-on-one teaching. So what advice do you all have?
Email, like, I have a few residents that are interested in breast imaging. I've emailed them different things. I have a case report I'm working on with someone. Email is helpful. I'm lucky from the standpoint that I'm APD, so we have, during COVID we had weekly meetings via Zoom. Now, well, I mean, COVID's not over, but the doldrums of April and May where no one was in the hospital, we were having weekly meetings with residents, just checking in and being like, what's going on. And so I would get to meet them, talk to them that way. But, just communication like this, like we're talking right now on Zoom, text messaging, emails, depending on, whatever your flavor is, just being available. And we've kind of beat the mentor thing into the ground at this point. It's so important to establish those relationships. And, it's not a one-way street. Being available, being open, and answering emails when people are emailing you, answering text messages when people text you. But, at the end of the day too, if you're going to be someone's mentor, that person has to want to be your mentee as well. So it's a two-way street. And so just being available is paramount.
Yeah, I think this is a very tricky question that we had because none of us has been in a pandemic before. We don't really know what the right answer is. I mean, for the fellows who they haven't started their job yet. I mean, whether they're starting end of July or in August, you can't even see people's faces because they're all wearing masks. But I echo what Matt said. Communication is very important. If you have colleagues who are working from home, just feel free to reach out to them and talk to them about cases. I mean, when I started, I didn't start in a time of pandemic. I built a relationship with some of my colleagues and some of the residents without even meeting them, to be honest. I mean, it was basically by phone or through WebEx meetings if we couldn't make it, in person. But again, I don't know what the right answer is. Probably follow the department protocol. If they want you to be, teaching the residents one-on-one session and in person, or some departments would have, they're using Zoom or they're using Microsoft WebEx. I agree, Matt. I mean, probably communication is the only thing that we can think of.
Yeah, and I think that everyone is kind of dealing with the pandemic differently. What technologies they're using, whether they're sharing screens and going through cases on the phone to get that one-on-one communication and teaching. And if it is, it's best that the trainee really make the most out of it, come up with conclusions, come up with pointed questions, because it's a lot less natural than if you're right next to them one-on-one doing the teaching, to do it over the phone, sharing a screen. Also, one thing that you may be able to do is get involved in research projects that can be done more remotely, and that sort of thing. If there's WebEx lectures instead of typical lectures, if there's an option to chat or interact in any way, try and do that to make an impression and get advice or answers.
Yeah, and if you're giving lecture on Zoom, turn on your camera so the residents can see what you look like.
Yeah, I mean, breast is like such a hands-on sort of thing, I mean, we still have residents that rotate with us. We change kind of the layout of our workstations. Some of our rooms, we move one of our monitors, for instance, to keep the 6 feet rule. And a lot of the times the monitors are kind of facing at least orthogonal directions. We're not really facing the same direction anyways. But I think we've really tried to continue, resident education throughout this time, because for a lot of people, this is still their only breast imaging rotation, and this may be the last time that they see breast until they go into whatever specialty that they're in. And that's really crucial. And in the future, they can't be like, oh, well, I was on breast during pandemic, and so I don't really know much, there's no excuse for that. So we still do our best, while trying to keep safe. Everybody's always wearing masks, in the reading room. And same thing with procedures too. We're still having residents be as involved as they can if they feel comfortable. And we're, somewhat close to them in the sense that we want to make sure that everything's going right for the patient as well. Outside of that, all of our noon lectures are now by Zoom. I completely agree with what Matt was saying. Email is really like the easiest way to contact people now. And being available and responding quickly is always appreciated. I know I appreciate it when I'm sending out something and all I get are like crickets. I'm like, what did I say here that nobody's saying anything? So being on the other side of that too, having a good ability to communicate with each other during this time is very important, I think.
All right. Well, I guess that concludes. We finished a few minutes early. I mean, if anyone else has another question we want to tackle or anything we want to share, otherwise, I guess we can give everyone a few extra minutes of their evening. So. All right. Well, thank you all today for participating in this Society of Breast Imaging Summer Series chat. Matt, next week, what's the topic that will be discussed?
Next week we actually added one next week, and the other Dr. Patel, Mitfit Patel, is going to be moderating, talking about applying for fellowship. So we're kind of going backwards a little bit, but it was kind of her brainchild as we were preparing for last week, in that we didn't have a webinar scheduled to talk about, applying for fellowship during this COVID thing and all the different changes that are being made, hopefully somewhat temporarily, but, at least permanent for this year, the application season. So we're talking about that. Dr. Patel is leading that discussion next week. So hopefully you all will join us.
Great. It'll be a great one. She's amazing. So, all right. Well,
I just want to thank you both, Amy and for moderating this. You guys did fantastic. This was a great discussion, and thank you to the other panelists as well. You guys are fantastic. I'm so happy with how these series have gone, and hopefully people that are watching are getting a lot out of this.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time. This was really great. I mean, I think we covered a lot of questions and a lot of concerns that fellows might have. I also want to add that the resident and fellow section of the SBI is available for the transitioning fellows. If you have any concerns, if you have any ideas for things or topics that we can discuss maybe for next year, it would be also helpful, because the main thing is to provide resources for you, and then the first 6 months of your, after fellowship, after graduating, you're still part of that committee. So it would be great to hear from you. So stay connected.
Yeah. And this year, as you all probably know, the Society of Breast Imaging has now devised a YPS section for young radiologists. And so I think, in the months to come, that the YPS and the RFS will be working together specifically for those who need us, who are transitioning to practice. All right. Well, thanks again, and please tune in next week.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.